going on in Sevastopol? It seems that the Black Sea Fleet headquarters is under attack. How important is this?
Well, they're at war. So at war, each side will bomb each other. Remember, during World War II, the Germans bombed London, and the Brits and Americans bombed Berlin. So there's always sort of that give and take in warfare. Ukraine has been under a lot of pressure to try to perform and to show some progress. So they've been launching these desperation attacks in Sevastopol against, trying to penetrate and disrupt the Russian fleet operations there. I don't know if there was a direct hit on the headquarters or if it was a shoot down and the missile fell into the headquarters. Regardless, there was some damage. Apparently, one Russian sailor is reported dead, and it doesn't change a thing on the battlefield. Not a thing. Well, the potential change is if the Russians can prove to a reasonable degree of certainty that the U.S. surveillance aircraft of Poseidon, the P-8 Poseidon, if that was involved in any way with passing intelligence that was used by Ukraine to launch those missiles and hit Russian targets, then I think we have the potential to see an escalation where Russia will start taking out, forcing down, or shooting down U.S. surveillance aircraft or British surveillance aircraft. I think Putin is actually probably going to come under greater pressure to do something about that. I heard, I haven't independently confirmed it, but I was told that Biden reversed himself today and has now authorized the deployment of ATACMS missiles, ATACMS, to Ukraine. If that's true, that still doesn't, it's not a game changer. Those missiles, I understand, have a range of around 190 miles. So what are we talking, 260 kilometers roughly? And that it can only reach into Russian territory or deep into Russian positions if it's brought close to the front lines. And the closer they bring it to the front lines, the more vulnerable it is to getting destroyed by Russian air power and drones. So again, this is, the West doesn't know what to do. They had counted on from the outset that Ukraine was going to deliver a military defeat to Russia. They really sincerely believed that. It was delusional, but that's what they believed at the very outset. And so now they keep trying to figure out how to patch them back up and get them back out on the field. Ukraine's the equivalent of a football player with two broken legs, and they're saying, get back out there and score a goal. Well, not going to happen. Pele with two broken legs may have been Pele when he was alive and a hero, but he wouldn't have scored any goals. And it's the same. It's the same for Ukraine right now.
When you look at the statements of General Mike Milley, how do you see his policy toward this war?
It's all politics with him, and it is delusional politics. He's expressing his hope. What the United States wants, what they're now banking on, is that this can be a long war, a stalemate. Now, a stalemate implies you got two sides that are equally matched, and one side has no advantage over the other. Well, that's not the case here. That's nonsensical. Russia has, for starters, 6 times the population, 7 times the population of Ukraine. Russia has intact production facilities where they can produce everything they need, from ammunition for pistols, handguns, rifles, up to ammunition for artillery shells, tanks, planes, armored vehicles, cruise missiles, drones, it goes on and on. So Russia can produce all of that. Ukraine can't. Ukraine is totally reliant upon the West to give it stuff. And the West is, if there's if you have a charity clothing collection on your block, in your neighborhood, your barrio, sometime, and people aren't going in grabbing their newest clothing and their best clothing. They're getting rid of the old stuff. Oh, okay, I don't wear that anymore. I'll throw that out. Well, that's what Ukraine's getting. They're getting the old stuff, and the old stuff doesn't work very well, and sometimes it's got holes in it, needs to be repaired. The casualty rate that Ukraine's suffering, dramatic difference. I mean, it's slowly coming out that the numbers are well in excess of 500,000 killed in action. It's an incredible number for the size of the country that Ukraine was. So there is no issue where Ukraine has an advantage over Russia. The West's impatience, they keep thinking that Russia needs to fight this war like the United States would fight the war. Well, the United States has never fought a war like this since World War II, or maybe the Korean War. And the people that fought those wars they're either really old or they're dead. So you don't have anybody in current leadership position within any branch of the U.S. military that has any kind of experience with this at all. And so for them to say, oh yeah, there's going to be stalemate, that's what the West wants. They believe very sincerely that if they just push Russia enough, Russia's economy will collapse. You and I were talking before you started going on air about that soft clay that you have to build things on in Brazil. They're looking for ways to stabilize it. Well, there's no way to stabilize Ukraine now. It's the very foundations of its military are weak, and it doesn't have any way to replace those foundations, to shore them up, to harden the underlying territory. So it's not a stalemate. But Milley believes it. Jake Sullivan believes it. I'm sure Joe Biden, if he can wake up for a minute, will believe it. You got members of Congress that believe it, but it's divorced from reality in my view.
If that's the case, why Zelensky is advocating for the continuation of this war? What he's gaining from this war? If Ukraine is losing in each and every aspect of this war, what he's continuing this war?
All about the Benjamins, as they say. Money, 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 money. Remember the song from Cabaret? That's what this is not about achieving some vision for a free and democratic Ukraine. Because the very foundation of this movement, the Bandera movement in Ukraine, is completely antithetical to human freedom and liberty. It's antithetical to toleration of different races and cultures and religions. It embodies many of the most heinous beliefs of the Nazis. So it's a radical ideology, and that undergirds what Ukraine is doing. That's why, we saw the Taliban some years ago start blowing up ancient statues and monuments because they felt that they were idolatrous. Well, you got the Ukrainians now. They're erasing great poets, writers, scientists, just because they're Russian. It's no different than if they were going out saying, we're going to find everything that's Jewish and get rid of it. We're going to burn it and destroy it. Now, that's what the Nazis tried to do to the Jews. Now Ukrainians are trying to do the same thing to the Russians.
Antony Blinken tweeted that Ukraine has reclaimed more than half the territory Russia seized.
Have they heard of Bakhmut? Have they heard of Solidar? Have they heard of Lysychansk? I mean, it just, what they're doing, it's a red herring. They're looking at Russia having vacated farmland around Kharkiv and Kherson and gone back, like in Kherson, they came back east across the river so they wouldn't be trapped in the event of a flood from a broken dam, which there subsequently was. And they're trying to say, oh yeah, Ukraine is winning because they've taken back more land than Russia ever took. It's a lie. It's not true. It's absolutely not true. And Ukraine's paying a terrible price. But that's what I mean, that these guys like Blinken, because that was a line Jake Sullivan used at the press conference. So you can tell they've written out the talking points. They've decided what lies they're going to tell. They're going to get all of them on the same sheet of music. They're all going to sing the same lie. And, lo and behold, it'll be true. This is no different than Adolf Hitler in his bunker on April 29th, 1945, commanding armies to move here and move there, armies that didn't exist. So, these guys are engaged in the same thing. It's delusional. It's crazy.
It was so strange at the UN. Nobody was advocating for peace and negotiations but Russia. And the country that is getting destroyed is Ukraine, is not Russia.
You're going to negotiate one of two ways. An unconditional surrender on the part of Ukraine. I think that's frankly the only way that this will end, because to have a conditional surrender means that Ukraine is going to have certain demands and Russia will have certain demands. Russia's not going to give up the territory that is taken back. It's not going to return the Donetsk, the Luhansk, the Kherson. None of those regions are going back to Ukraine, period. Not negotiable. And Ukraine has insisted that they want Crimea back too. They're not going to give up unless they get Crimea and Kherson and Zaporizhia and Donetsk and Luhansk back. Unless that all comes back and Russia gets out, they're not going to settle. Well, they're not going to be in a position to dictate that. And that's why I say it's going to probably come down to an unconditional surrender on their part. Russia's just going to have to bleed them dry. It sounds horrifying, and it is, but I don't see any other way out of this.
The most important supporter of Ukraine in Europe was Poland, and is Poland. It seems that there's some disagreements between these two countries. In your opinion, how serious is this?
Well, I think it's pretty serious. I mean, the words being exchanged back and forth are not, love notes. The Duda did declare Ukraine is the equivalent of a drowning man and is dangerous as such. He then came out, I guess, today trying to, no, I was misinterpreted. No, I didn't really say that. Well, he said it. And they also said that they were no longer going to ship new weapons to Ukraine. Now they're saying they're backing away a little bit from that. All of this is in Poland's being driven principally because they've got elections coming up, I believe, in 3 weeks. It's in October. And the farmers, who are still a significant voting bloc in Poland, have really suffered at the hands of the imports of grain from Ukraine. So it's driven down the price of grain, wheat in Poland. And so they've been, they're angry at the government for allowing this. So there's, the domestic politics in the election in Poland is really going to be driving how much support Poland can actually extend to Ukraine. They didn't say anything about whether they would try to block the transit of new equipment. Like M1 Abrams is currently in Poland. It should be going across the border any day now. So we have to wait and see what's going to happen.
Seymour Hersh reported that the U.S. intelligence believes Russia has won this conflict in Ukraine, but the White House and U.S. media are lying about it.
Yeah.
Do you think this kind of intelligence has been provided to Biden, or he's not aware of this?
No, they've provided it. They're just not accepting it. They're not believing it. And it's not just Biden. I mean, Blinken, Jake Sullivan, Victoria Nuland, they're all ignoring it. I spoke with a friend who's a military intelligence officer. He was in a briefing, 2 days ago, and the one-star general, a brigadier general, who was doing the briefing, insisted that Russia was going to be crumbling, with Russia was just couldn't withstand the pressure, that Russia was going to fail. I mean, this is a one-star general. He should know better. He has access to the intelligence, but he's ignoring it. So that, and that's not unique to the situation. It is, in fact, not unusual. I've seen it before. So that people get themselves locked into one worldview. This is the only way that it can be, and no amount of facts will dissuade them from that.
When you look at the face of Zelensky, when Biden was talking at the UN,
Yeah.
it was, why he was so desperate and sad. What's happening with him? Are the things behind the scene are different from what we are hearing?
Yeah. No, they had received bad news at that point. There were, maybe he was told there'd be no attackums. Maybe they learned the full extent of that Poland was no longer going to be helping. In any event, they were not looking. They didn't look happy and victorious. You've seen a sports team when they win a championship, when they win a game, they're not all sitting there going, they're yay, they're celebrating and hollering and cheering. Didn't see any of that from Zelensky. So, the face tells you a lot. The body language was communicating volumes.
Do you think these attacks in Sevastopol has anything to do with just a booster to give positive thinking in?
Oh yeah, no, it was designed to play as part of this overall look with Ukraine. Ukraine is really hitting the Russians hard, and every time Ukraine does something like this, Russia just responds with a greater retaliation. So there'll be a large. They may actually now go after some actual military headquarter buildings in Kiev, take them out, destroy them. Up to this point, they've avoided that because, again, they didn't want to. I think they didn't want to run the risk of killing foreign military advisors. But the gloves, they may take the gloves off on that particular issue.
We've seen that Putin gonna go to China to this forum, and Belt and Road Forum, and Assad as well. He was invited to China. He's gonna be there in China, and how important is these guys didn't participate in G20. Now they're going. They're going to have. Yeah.
I mean, well, we're witnessing the emergence of a new world order that is not run by, controlled by, or led by the United States. G20, G7, United Nations, World Trade Organization, all of these international organizations have been set up and been, very much under the influence of the United States, and were used actually sometimes as cudgels to bludgeon countries like Russia or Iran or Cuba or China. And these countries now, thanks to the special military operation and the West's response to it, they're fed up. They're not going to take it anymore from the United States. The United States has been a bully. The United States felt that it could seize territory and money at will. I pulled up the other day the Congressional Research Service report on U.S. military interventions overseas. And since 1991, so we're talking 32 years now. In those last 32 years, the United States, on average, has carried out about 8 military operations a year. So it's just, yeah, that's right. So it's going back to 1991. So it's just, it's well over 200, approaching probably 230. We'll look at Russia. How many has Russia done? 5, maybe. And those were all on its borders, all in direct conflicts related to the direct security of Russia. How about China? None. The last Chinese adventure, I think, was to try to, when they fought Vietnam, because Vietnam had invaded Cambodia. So, my point is that in the United States, you get politicians frequently portraying Russia and China as aggressive military empires bent on conquering territory and taking over the world. That's good in psychology. That's called projection. Because the only country that's been doing that consistently over the last 30 years is the United States of America, not Russia, not China.
Larry, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, if we look at this neocons agenda in the US, it failed in each and every aspect. Look at the Middle East, look at Africa, look at Asia. They're failing. So, but they're continuing the same policy.
Yeah. That's I think it was at least Einstein's credited with it. I don't think he necessarily said it. It's become lore, but the definition of insanity is when you keep doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different outcome. Well, that perfectly describes what the neocon plan, how well it's been going.
Let's assume that Biden gets reelected. And
well, you are an optimist, aren't you?
Because I don't know, because he's continuing this for this re-election, not anything. No. There is no motive behind this. What do you think?
If the only way he'd be reelected is if they stole every vote they could possible. So he, if it's a fair election, he will not be reelected. And I think, we're in a dangerous period. Because I think some people overseas, but sometimes I think they are overly optimistic about the desire or sentiment in the West, particularly in America, to actually entertain negotiations, that they will cut Zelensky loose and go forward with some negotiations behind the scene. I don't see Biden or Blinken or Sullivan or Victoria Nuland or Lloyd Austin, the Secretary of Defense. I don't see any of them backing off of their strident support for Ukraine. So when you have that kind of, they're just dug in like a tick. They've firmly embedded themselves and they're bloodsuckers. I don't see them being able to lead the way or put pressure on Ukraine to negotiate. And candidly, I don't think Zelensky's of any mind or has any interest at all in listening to anybody from the U.S. side, because he views any negotiation as surrender. I think he's gonna either have to be killed or captured. I don't think there's any middle ground on this.
If not Biden, who else? Donald Trump? RFK Jr. RFK Jr. right now they're totally forcing him out of this party, this Democratic Party.
The control over this process, as we saw in 2016, when Donald Trump came down this, the staircase or the escalator at his building in May of 2015. Very, very, none of the pundits, with the exception maybe of Ann Coulter, gave him any chance whatsoever of winning. They laughed. Oh, not going to happen. No way. Well, he did. He won. So the same sort of confident predictions now about who will or will not be in place, I don't put a lot of stock in them. I think Trump will definitely be part of the picture. As much as people want to get rid of him and shut him down and shut him up, he's not going away. I think RFK will gain some traction. And what we're likely to see is the emergence of at least 3, maybe 4 different political movements. I won't call them parties, but you'll have the Democrat Party. You'll have a fragment, a break off from the Democrat Party that will back somebody like RFK. You've got another group called No Labels. They're an amalgam of Republicans and Democrats that don't like Donald Trump, don't like their traditional Republicans. So they're trying to set up something as an alternative. And then you have Trump. So with that kind of split, I think the United States is looking at some political chaos next year, unlike anything we've ever seen since the early days of the Republic, or maybe since the Civil War. The United States is very insular, and so it has enjoyed, throughout its entire history, not having to face an actual invasion until now. We're now being invaded across the southern border by these illegal migrants. But that kind of insularity doesn't help prepare you to be able to go out and interact on an international stage. And so a lot of times there's not really an appreciation. We don't have the ability to put ourselves in the shoes of Vladimir Putin or in the shoes of Xi Jinping and see the world how they see it. We only see it how we see it. And that the lens we look through is decidedly everything revolves around the United States of America, and nobody else has any right to usurp anything that we do. What really needs to be done now is for the United States to come out and admit, hey, folks, we've been wrong. We've been an unnecessary bully. We have tried to coerce China and Russia in ways that are not appropriate, and we pledge now we're going to stop that and try to have respectful relations with one another.